One, two, three, here we go. Hey everybody, welcome back. Chalkboard History, take 2 of volume 2. We are filming this on Monday, January 20th, 2025. It is inauguration day, putting aside all sorts of feelings that many people have out there. What we're seeing today, and I'm not trying to be, ridiculous about this, but this day is the one that it's the kind of day that truly makes this country very special, because it is literally a transfer of power, and it is meant to be peaceful, unlike some of the stuff we saw 4 years ago. And maybe we can return to some sense of normalcy, but that's for others to decide. But we're always, history's being made, like, as we're talking about it. And when this man took his first inaugural address, wow. And then think about the second time he did it, just a few weeks before the end of the American Civil War. And God, we still live in the shadow of that thing. So we are here with Adam Thomas, longtime employee of the Battle of Franklin Trust, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Carter House Visitor Center project, which has been that's been going on since about George Bush's first term, to give you a sense of how long we've worked on that project. But we're about to break ground. So ding-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling, that's huge. This is an $8 million project. It's going to be a 9,500 square foot, 2-story building that is going to help us tell not only the story of the Carter family and the Battle of Franklin, but the whole mess, really, from the beginning, pre-war, through the war, the aftermath. We should open to the public sometime in the late spring or early summer of 2026. And what a day that's going to be. So Adam is here because he is going to be documenting the breaking ground, the construction, and all the way up until the day that we open it to the public. And so that's huge. I just said huge. I mean, huge. It's Trump's word. Huge. It's huge. It's the biggest it's ever been. It's the greatest thing ever. So what we're going to talk about isn't really just the visitor center, but how the breaking ground to the opening of it is the really bookends to a project you came and talked to me about a few weeks ago. So tell us a little bit about this unnamed project that you're going to, it's your baby, so tell us about it.
Well, I've got multiple babies right now. But this project that you're talking about and this documentation that I'm doing will go for really multiple projects. But the one that I'm primarily focusing on right now is the BOFT 365, as we're dubbing it, which is really just something that you came to me with after the anniversary. So after the anniversary this year, you said, this big hullabaloo, this big thing, lots of guests, lots of planning. And when it all came to fruition and it was all done, the people left, the crowds dispersed, and then the duties of the trust continued, the day-to-day, back to giving tours. Now we're cleaning up and all this stuff like that. And you told me that it just really struck you how it's hard for a lot of people to understand how a site like this is run. And you really wanted to give the opportunity to show the world what we actually do on a day-to-day basis. And so that is the foundation of the 365 documentary, where we are going to be following, I am going to be, mostly me, hopefully with some help from others, following the staff around, going to meetings, talking about the day-to-day activities of the trust, and showing the world what we do.
All the sexy stuff that doesn't involve talking about John Bell Hood.
Absolutely.
And why he decided to attack at Franklin.
Exactly. Because and I had a conversation with my mom several days after we had talked about this documentary. I was telling her about it and this project, and I was very excited about it. And, she said a question. She asked me a question, which I think is the perfect reason why we have to make this film. And she asked me, And for the record, before I say this, my mom is amazing, and she supports everything I do, and she knows, and she's very involved in the things that I do. But she is one of those people that doesn't understand what it takes to run this place because it's not her world. And so when she asked me, she said, it's what left is there to do? I mean, you guys are a historical site. The history is there. You tell the story. You've got the markers up and stuff like that. Like, what are you guys at? What is there left to do? And it's just like, that is the exact reason we have to make this film because there is more left to do than anything we've ever done in the past.
It's like Santa's.
Right?
It's like Santa's list. It just goes on and on and on.
And I'm super excited about this project and the support that I've gotten, not just from you, right, from buying the equipment we need and all this stuff, but the members of the staff who are very excited, offering their support and their help because I'm going to be the one bugging them with a camera in their face over the next year. And so we're calling it the 365 documentary because it's following 365 days. And I say we're calling it. We haven't decided that as the name yet. It's just kind of a placeholder, right? But we're going to be following for 365 days, anniversary to anniversary. And so a huge part of that film is going to be the progress over this next year on the visitor center. And so this visitor center is, like you said, I mean, I've been here going on 8 years now. And I remember when I first started in 2017 talking about, we're probably just a year or two away from breaking ground on this visitor center. And it just didn't, you know, and here we are 8 years later, that I've worked here and it's finally happening. I got to go film and document a meeting you had with the state and the construction the contractors who are going to be coming and building this. And I got to witness that, and it was really amazing that it's actually happening. It's actually for real happening. And so this is going to be a really great thing that we're going to be able to show the world. And then this other film, which I don't know if this is the one you really wanted me to talk about, but that's the one that is a true culmination where the opening of the visitor center is going to be the culminating event in this other documentary is this film about reclamation. Mm-hmm. And I know that we probably don't want to go into that one too much, but both films are going to have a large portion of it is going to be the building of this visitor center. And we've got big plans. You know, I talked to the contractors and was just like, I'm going to be in your space filming, flying drones and all this stuff like that. They were super supportive. They were like, you do whatever you got to do. You know, you're not going to bother us. So I'm really excited. And seeing this visitor center open is going to be great. Which, by the way, we were talking about this at the Carter House the other day. We need to do like a ceremonial ribbon cutting for like the staff bathroom at the Carter House when the visitor center opens, because like that is there's a lot of things about the visitor center that make it difficult to work in this day and age. Maybe 30, 40 years ago, it was perfect when 2 people visited a week.
Right.
But now we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of visitors per week, and the one bathroom is suffering. And so that's the worst part. And so if there's one thing that the staff who gives tours at the Carter House is excited about, it is the new toilets.
So, yes, you want to run a historic site. You have to think about, things like, well, toilets, toilet paper, how much coffee, what about water? What about on a day like today when it's 13 degrees outside, frozen pipes, there's, it will be very interesting, even for me, who I've lived this for years, to sort of see it from a detached perspective over the course of a year. And I think for most anyone who watches it, it'll be very revealing about how much work really does go into managing not just a site or 2, but 3 sites, parts of 2 battlefields. And when we say 360 days a year, that's what we're open. It's really 365 days a year. There is not a day during the year, not one, where I'm not somehow connected to some element of work. I'm never removed from it. So I was thinking as I was driving in this morning so we got really 2. We've got the project for the 365, and then we've got this reclamation project. And I was thinking about a question was thinking on the way in about why did I get into this? Like, what the heck? But I was just thinking about a question I asked Jenny about her perspective on the war, why this matters. And so I'm going to get to you because we were talking the other day about your interview. And I asked you a question, and I think you said it took you like 5 minutes to get to the end result. So going back to like we created a master plan for the Visitor Center in 2015. And then we had our first version of what we wanted the first exhibit in the museum to be. And it's still going to be that. And my idea then is no different than now, is to focus on the premise that all men are created equal. That I wanted to take people, listen, if you're going to be like a Christian theologian, you better go back and read Genesis. So I wanted to go back to what was our Genesis, and that is the Declaration of Independence. And this wasn't an opinion. It's a self-evident fact. All men are created equal. And we put that through the ringer. And we tortured ourselves as a country about whether the document, which was our moral bedrock, meant what it said. And then we had to fight a war. Because at the center of all that is this, it's this system, slavery, which is diametrically the opposite of all men are created equal. So we had to concoct a lie, which is that the Declaration only applied to white people, which is not what it says. And all of this is, I think, in some way a reckoning with our past, confronting who we were before there was electricity, before there was fresh coffee, before there was all these gadgets that we live in. There was this idea. And then I was thinking about the question I asked you, and I put this to you because I had some sense of who you were, and you wore the uniform. And I was like, why does this matter? Did the right side win the war? And that, I think, was the question I asked you. Or what were your thoughts as you went through that process and then you think about where we are today? And really what we have done as a country over the last 10 years, reckoning with our past. So what does all of it mean to you?
Well, I guess just to start answering that question, I just want to add context to the question that you asked me during my interview with you in 2017 when I got hired. And you asked me in that interview, did the right side win the war? Which is not something I was expecting to hear in this interview. I had for, a couple weeks leading up to this, studied about the Battle of Franklin and watched all these videos and read as much as I could and prepared myself to talk to you about the Battle of Franklin. Like I knew I was going to talk. And then I think within the first 5 minutes of my interview with you, you said, hey, I don't care at all how much you know about the Battle of Franklin. I can teach you whatever you need to know about the Battle of Franklin. I have to know about you. And I was like, oh, well, that was a waste of time, And it wasn't a waste of time because I enjoyed it. But at the same time, that interview was it was an hour-long plus talk where we didn't talk about the Battle of Franklin at all. And you dug into my philosophy. And at that point in my life, I was 27 years old, and I was undergoing a huge change in how I thought about the Civil War. I had not thought about the Civil War differently until that year, since I was like 12. I had grown up in Tennessee in this area where I was introduced to the Civil War by other Southerners and family members who had their beliefs about what the war was about, and they passed those on to me. And I remember my dad telling me that the only place in the Carter house fit to hang John Bell Hood's face was the men's toilet.
And there it hung.
And there it hung. And then in my mid-20s, I had a career which I loved and enjoyed, but it wasn't in history. It wasn't in anything like this. And then so when I moved back to Middle Tennessee, to Nashville, I came back to the Carter house, which is the very first Civil War site I ever went to, and spurred my love of history.
That was your first?
Yeah, I was 10 years old, 9 or 10.
Wow.
Was the Carter house. And I'll never forget, the Carter house was amazing.
Mine was Wilson's Creek.
Wilson's Creek. I've never been to Wilson's Creek. But Yeah, the Carter House is amazing. I'll never forget that. I remember Carnton. I remember the trailers and the gravel lot. But what I really remember was Winstead Hill. Winstead Hill is where like it sunk in for me. Strangely enough, I'll never forget because we had spent the day going around these sites, but it wasn't until I saw the bird's eye view, and back then the tree you could see the full panorama of Franklin. The trees weren't blocking you, and I remember that moment. But anyway, I offered my services to the trust as a volunteer, and you were like, you know, because I can only work part time. I've only ever worked part time here because of my other career, my actual career. This has always just been a passion thing, and as I've gotten to watch as a part-timer, I've been able to keep the trust at like a distance. And it's like I was telling you, like, I am just so happy to be a part of this because I've been able to see that evolution over the last 8 years from like someone who gets to like be a part of it. But really, I just get to kind of reap the benefits of it.
So when I asked you about if the right side won the war, what do you think about that all these years later?
Oh, well, yeah. So you asked me, did the right side win the war? I got sidetracked. And I totally waffled on it. What today, if you asked me, did the right side win the war? I say, of course. Easy. 1 second flat. But back then, I was still dealing with a lot of those lessons, which I had... I was trying to unlearn.
And isn't that what a little bit of what we do every day?
Every single day. I say that's one of the great privileges of working here is getting to talk to people, well-meaning people who love history.
Right.
And they come and then you see their brain starting to unwind when you talk about things differently than they've ever heard it before. And
encouraging them sometimes. Just let it go.
Yeah.
And you can let it go. You can embrace the past, but also let go of the nostalgia about it.
Exactly. And that interview itself was like the final stage of like my metamorphosis out of my lost cause, like understanding of the Civil War. It really was. I shed so much and I was just like, I felt like I was reborn. Like I'm about to be a part of something really freaking cool here. Because just to finish the thought on how I answered the question, you asked me, did the right side win the war? And I'm a veteran. You know, I was in the military. And so having served in the military, you'd think it would be easy for me to say, well, yeah, I'm an American. I'm a Marine. I'm all like, I served my country. I love this kind of patriotic. And I don't know if I had ever considered that question ever a day in my life. I was a Southerner, a proud Southerner, and always wondered, what it'd be like if the South had won and the cause, and I was starting to unlearn that. And I thought differently at that moment than I had about the Civil War previously, but I wasn't finished learning until really that moment, when I could say with absolute certainty, I'm glad that the South lost.
Or the Confederacy lost.
Or the Confederacy lost, right. So, yes, the Confederacy lost. The South didn't lose the war. The Confederacy lost the war.
I think the South actually benefited from the Confederacy losing because certainly millions of people who lived in the South who were black were freed. Mm-hmm. And strangely enough, many whites also had invisible shackles removed from them, which was this constant agitation between races. Now, it took a long time for that to shake out. And they were able to finally allow the United States, fragmented and broken as it was, to mature. And I believe that this is a huge part of what you're going to hear. I know I'll talk about it. You will hear about it. You will see guests exposed to it. And then eventually the viewer will see it. And I think sometimes a lot of people look at what we're doing, I'll be honest, and they're like, why are they wasting their time? Or why does Jacobson have to do this? Why are they taking this approach? And I'm like, because it's true. This part of, I think, the dilemma with our Civil War is also an American dilemma. We look back and we think that we got to this point because we've always been here. Oh my God. This was an experiment, although grounded in self-evident truth. A lot of people didn't accept that truth. They weren't willing to concede what the Declaration said. Liberty only extended about as far as the end of your fist could reach for some people. But there was always that glimmer. I made this comment somewhere last week that there was always this faint, sometimes flickering light that the experiment stayed alive just long enough. And I believe, listen, I can see why Jefferson Davis, John Bell Hood, etc. did what they did. That was the easy thing. I think the hard thing is to do what he did, or what he did, which is sometimes to make war on your own people because you have to, because there is something bigger at stake, which is the preservation of the Union, which is the preservation of the United States, which gets back to that question. And through all of our imperfections and all of our problems, 250 years after this country was founded and 160 years after we fought the Battle of Franklin, we're still here. And one president is about to step down, and another who, in all of the history, what's today? Is he 47?
Yeah.
47. We've had more Super Bowls than we've had presidents. You know, I think that there is something maddening about who we are, but I think there is something intoxicating about it. Yeah. And I think for me, you brought up Hood hanging in the bathroom. I remember that guy, born in Kentucky, West Point graduate, strapped on the gear, lost a leg, fought to destroy the United States, but lived in the United States after it. And as he promised he would do when he took his amnesty oath, he promised to defend the United States with the same, I'm paraphrasing, with the same fervor with which he attempted to tear it asunder. Now, if that guy can do it, I think we can. And he left his Confederate uniform behind and he moved on. Didn't have to apologize because why? He conceded that they had lost. The Confederates had lost the war. And here we are. And I think, you know, I'm not going to wrap myself in the flag, but I think that this country is profoundly special. And I think that you can't realize sometimes how special it was until you look at what we did to each other for 4 years. But as Lincoln said the day of his second inaugural, this was our punishment as a nation. 250 years of unrequited toil. He was talking about slavery. And I hope that comes through in what you film, but what you see, because honestly, I've had to be a little bit reflective on this path that I've helped to chart. And I want people to understand what we do every day, not just the nuts and bolts of running a historic site, but what we do every day to tell people that it's okay to let go of the past so that you have a better appreciation of the world that we live in today and how flickering and faint sometimes that light of liberty really is.
And that is the mission. That's the goal of this film. You know, we've talked about it several times, and I've talked to the staff about it. It's not this film is not good enough to just be topical, right? We're not going to talk about just the nuts and bolts of what we do day to day, and we give tours and we have meetings. The connections with the people who work here, the impacts. Like a film that a scene that I just shot recently for the documentary was a 31-year-old who learned that they had an ancestor who was enslaved at Rippavilla. And they reached out to Christy and said, I want to learn more about my ancestor. And we brought this person here. We filmed them getting a tour, brought several friends and family. There were, I think, 5 or 6 of them. And watching them come back to this place and go into the cabin where his ancestor lived. And we went to the cemetery where his family is buried. And watching that person cry at the cemetery, at the grave of their ancestors, as they're seeing this healing occur. That is the kind of stuff we do all the time, not just give tours. Changing people. And how many times do we come off tour or we have guests that come and we say, and they tell us things like, I have never, ever heard anything like this before. More people need to hear this.
And you know what's great about that story, which is, I think, the second time you told that to me? That person felt comfortable, finally comfortable, or had the knowledge to come to a place like Rippavilla. Could have been Carnton. It could be Belmead. It could be Monticello. But that they finally had the chance to do it, and that they had the courage to do it. Because the easiest thing to do, honestly, is to show up at a place where one of my ancestors was, because it wasn't my history that was completely blighted away, and I could say that I'm proud of that, but I think it's a responsibility. You've heard me say this: is Black history is as much a part of these sites as anything, and that history has, in many ways, almost been completely whitewashed, and that is healing. That's progress. That you can actually concede both things.
Right. I mean, we and also, just to correct myself, is Carnton, where their ancestors were enslaved. I'm at Rippavilla, so I said Rippavilla, but it was.
Oh,
at
that's right,
Carnton.
because I saw the footage of you out in the cemetery.
So they were at Carnton, where the ancestors were enslaved. But yes, people being upset that we put up those silhouettes of the enslaved at Carnton, and it's like, if we're going to tell stories of people, right, which is what we do, we bring the stories of these human beings to the present to understand how they lived, because how they lived and everything that happened because of the way they lived impacts how we live today. We can't just tell stories of the white people. That's what's been told the entire time. And if you brought up the slaves, it would be talked about, but it would be pushed aside. Their stories were not at the forefront, but they lived here in greater numbers than the family did.
And you'll probably...
And they're as much a part of the story as any. It doesn't make any sense, if you want to talk about history, to talk about half of it.
And some of it, I think some of what people will see is that we also have to push back sometimes against the extremes. And that extreme can come from either side of the political spectrum. But just recently, we had someone fussing about how Rippavilla was like a Black concentration camp. And I just want to say, oh, shut up, okay? That totally diminishes what a concentration camp really was, especially as people in the modern world think of it. Okay, it's like screaming about people being fascists and Nazis. It's like, shut up about that. It's not objective on any level. But we've also heard people diminish the impact of slavery. Oh, it wasn't really that bad. Oh, they love their masters. So it's a little bit like being in shark-infested waters. You never know what you're going to encounter. But I know this. This is a story worth telling. From the moment I wrote about the battle, which was really telling a story about a battle that was forgotten in a war that often was too romanticized, or was very sort of Gettysburg, Vicksburg, Robert E. Lee, U.S. Grant-centric. Franklin was this terrible spasm of violence at the end of a long and violent war. And I think we've done a good job at reclaiming the battlefield. I know that's part of what you're going to be doing. So I look forward to it. Last thoughts? Anything you want to tell people out there to be ready for, or be willing to, experience?
Yes. Well, be on the lookout. We've got some guest engagement initiatives, if that's what you want to call them.
If you visit, you may get a camera in your face.
You may get a camera in your face, because like we talked about, these stories of people. And one of the most important parts of this story is the amazing things we hear from our guests constantly. 7 days a week, every day, we have guests come off our tours and say, that was the best tour I ever had. You're the best tour guide I've ever had. Not just to me. Every single guide at our sites have heard that. Every single guide at our sites has heard, I need more people need to hear this story. More people should be exposed to this. How different my way of thinking would have been if I could have heard it presented like this years ago. So those moments of real truth and change that are occurring are things that we're going to try and capture. So we've got a lot of things coming to try and get those, not suggestion boxes, but feedback boxes. We want you to film videos of yourself. We want all sorts of feedback related to that. And because that's going to be a vital part of our documentary. You are going to be a vital part of this film. As our guests. You guys are what make us very special. So that, and then I guess my final thought about the topic of what we talked about was just when we said the Confederacy lost the war, not the South, because the South did benefit. And that's a hard thing for a lot of people to acknowledge, that the South did benefit. And for me, the proof is the fact that I was born and raised in Tennessee. And I grew up in a world, even if I didn't understand fully the South or the legacy of the war, I was born into a world where I understood that slavery was wrong. I knew that from the second I was born. Nobody ever told me that slavery was good or morally right. And if that isn't a benefit, then I don't know what is.
And if slavery is wrong, then there's no way the Confederacy was ever right.
And it took me 27 years to take those two thoughts, which are so easy to understand, but were in conflict with each other in my brain, to finally separate them and be like, that's just simply the way it is.
You know what I told?
And that right there is the benefit of it all.
You know what I told? I won't mention who it was, but it was years ago. Someone on the staff asked me about, slavery in northern states. And I said, absolutely. There was slavery in some of the northern states, New York, Pennsylvania, and someone said, well, what about a place like Michigan? And I think I laughed. And then I realized they were being serious. And I said, there was never slavery in Michigan. There was never slavery in Iowa. Those states were always free. Now, that doesn't mean they weren't beset with all sorts of racial issues. And this person didn't know that. And I thought, wow, that was a simple one. And if a million simple pieces can create a complex problem, it's no wonder it's taken us so many generations to unravel it. And I look forward to continuing this work, and I look forward to seeing what you're going to come up with. But I look forward to the people will tell you something. They've told me for years. They've told me what they want, what they're afraid of, what they don't understand, what they're angry about. And there's something to be learned from all of them who visit our sites too. So with that, thank you. This is episode 2 of volume 2 in the can. We're going to film a whole bunch of these, meet the staff over the next few weeks, but I bet you will see Adam a lot in what we're going to be doing in the future. All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you.